my dad, he kind of he went to school, Korean school, to ninth grade, and pretty much that was a norm. Interesting because on the Fujii side, their eldest son, and number one son, pretty much got his way and convinced his parents to allow him to finish Korean school to 12th grade. And you know, most of the time, when you finish school, high school, I mean, while attending school and class is over, you had a lot of farm chores to do. You know, the weeding, pruning. It's a year-round thing, year-round job, basically. But he was able to spend some time and playing sports, and he played football for Konoe. So kind of different life custom for the Fuji side. He was 1 year old. Uncle Richard was 1 year older than my dad, so you know he kind of like set the pace, but it was very different lifestyle basically. And my grandmother wanted to go did couple of visits to Japan to see her family and so forth. And so from the young age of 16, during the summer months and so forth, he would go to um, what is it, Kurdistan and Mountain View area to work summer job as a work in the cane field, and then that provided the funds for my grandma to go and visit relatives in Japan. Whereas on the Fuji side, pretty much no contact. In fact, when Auntie Jane went to visit, they kind of like wasn't interested in or had difficulty meeting the Fuji side of the family, because my grandfather, Genzo Fujii, he had property still yet in Japan, and then he had left it to his nephew to maintain it, but with the hopes that one day when he returned to Japan, you know, he has a property. Same way with the Motomura side, we have land there, and then a house, and then but the original house that Sei lived in was kind of old. So one year, this is before the war, I'm sorry, in the 30s, late 30s, he went back and tore down the Motomura home and then built one, because the mom was already living there, yeah. So and then that house that my grandfather built pretty much was sold in around in the late 80s, 1989, maybe early 1990 or somewhere on there. And the farm, the house assets were divided to my dad and Uncle Kiyoshi, and partially to me. Well, I don't know whether, yeah, I was just about to get my master's degree, so he wanted, Uncle Kiyoshi wanted to invest that in a Motomura for that higher degree. So I got a small portion of it. But going back to his situation, Uncle Kiyoshi, of course he knew English, but in order to teach, he had to further educate himself. So he went to University of Chicago to to get his degree in English, and then I think he went to Oxford for a couple of summers or something like that to enhance his English expertise, and then landed a job at Waseda, from which he retired. So to fund that his education, both the Fujii side and Motomura side, uh, being siblings basically, provided financial support for the education to University of Chicago and Oxford. So it was kind of like, okay, if payback when I was going for my master's degree. So that old money, my education was partially funded by the old money, very old money, from the first generation. Yeah. So
How the Motomuras and the Fujiis, how are they related?
brothers and sister.
Through
Down grandma is your great grandfather Masaki's younger sister by 3 years.
down grandma.
Down grandma is Hatsune.
Oh, okay.
Hatsune came from Japan at age 11. And
Okay.
your great grandfather Masaki came to Hawaii at age 14. 3 years difference.
So Masaki and Sugi, they both got their piece, their land, right? Then Hatsune was next, and she married
Fujii.
Fujii.
Yeah, usually the
And
females weren't given any property. You marry into another family, and so
and then the two youngest children went back to
yeah,
Japan.
Japan.
Okay.
Oh, and I mean not back to Japan, but went to Japan because they were born here. The last two.
So Grandpa Frank and Grandma Elsie, they were
Cousins,
cousins.
yeah.
So they always knew each other.
Yeah.
Um, and what was growing up? What was their relationship like? They were they were close in age, right? Like 2 years.
3.
3.
Yeah.
So they were just basically like friends growing up.
Yeah.
And I mean, if it wasn't for the war and getting married, then they probably wouldn't have gotten
Yeah.
married.
I mentioned about during the summers he used to work in Kurdistan.
Mm-hmm.
There was a ex-Kona guy who had a small uh, private sugar producer. So he hired a lot of Kona people. So dad and a lot of the families also, who knew this person would go there for work, And while 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 he was there, he had a girlfriend. My dad had a girlfriend, but before the war, and then fairly about maybe a good year before the war broke out, everybody was expecting that war with Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So this girlfriend actually got married to another guy, probably with the same idea. So without losing his girlfriend, and then the war breaking out, war was imminent. So he 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 kind of like got married to my mom, knowing her.
But why did the girlfriend marry someone else instead of just Grandpa?
He was from the same town, so they met more frequently, and then this was before the war, so I'm sure it's kind of like the same situation where get married and you don't have to go serve. Yeah.
During this time, I mean, the local population then was still pretty small.
Yeah, small, very small.
So there weren't a lot of options as far as
Yeah.
dating other people.
Yeah, just to keep on farming.
Well, how come? So the population was small enough that families weren't doing like arranged marriages. Like it just never entered their mind to do things like that?
No, no. Well, it could be friends or, you know, go matchmaking, but that you pretty much get married on your own.
The war officially started then? Bef- Before they got married? Grandma and grandpa?
No, no. The war started after they got married because your dad is 1941, was born in 1941. So, in fact, what on the very day they bombed, December 7th is your father's birthday.
I think it's the ninth.
Ninth, okay. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they were married, and I don't know, a year or something, or that same year.
So Grandpa Frank just kind of sensed, or everyone sensed that the war was imminent, and that the safest thing to do would be to get married. But
Use that
wasn't
waiver.
that kind of but how like that a guarantee though? I mean, if
Oh
it
yeah,
doesn't seem
especially
like
when, in the case in Hawaii, was very common to get that uh, uh, release basically, because being farmers, you were classified as uh, essential to the war effort. Producing food and coffee, and people. If you were growing something, then especially in Hawaii, you become isolated islands, and then the shipment of products from the mainland was really hampered. Yeah, so whatever island grown stuff and the farmers that produced that were essential to the economy and livelihood of these islanders. Yeah, yeah.
so on the mainland that kind of thing and
Because they were on relocation camps, so you know they didn't support the families didn't support it the the war efforts, or provide the you know like for example, all of Southern Cal mostly were Japanese truck farmers, and then they lost that ability when they got relocated to camps, and then they grew within the compounds for their use, but not to wasn't providing the whole compound, the camp. You had to have some external help. Yeah.
Grandpa Frank asked Grandma to marry him, right? And it
Yeah.
was her decision as whether she wanted to or not.
Yeah.
So did she ever talk to you about that decision? Like, was it easy for her, or
I
was it?
think probably the reason was the war, and then a marriage will resolve that concern, basically. So for both grandmas, for both of my grandmas, yeah. So
Did she ever tell you, like, I mean, from just like a personal standpoint, what it was like? Did they ever, or did they ever talk about even Grandpa too? Did he talk about it?
no,
Like outside of this situation and getting married in order to avoid.
she mentioned one time that she had a boyfriend.
Hmm.
My mom had a boyfriend, but was pressured into to marrying my dad uh, because of that reason, yeah, the war reason. Yeah.
So, so do you think she was upset about it then, or?
Yeah, but like I said, they had the normal difficulties of a marriage, but no inkling of divorcing or whatever.
It's interesting though. She had a boyfriend too. What I mean, she could have she could have married that boyfriend, right?
To get out of this
Yeah,
fixed
like
marriage. Yeah, that's possible too.
did it eventually become a decision for her that to choose one or the other? The boyfriend
Yeah,
or
I think
grandpa? Or?
you in respect of the the elderly's wishes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and then there was a lot of marriages of cousins in that era and in that time.
Mm.
Yeah, so very common practice. Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, so Uncle Richard graduating from Corona High School. Um, Again, your ascension to a better job or lifestyle was very stymied because and so upon graduating he moved to Hilo. And again, that's kind of odd because usually the first son, the elder son, would take over the farm, and they had their own farm. So that's odd too. I don't know why. He had his way, he had his own mind, and then he, at that age, he, my down grandfather Genzo Fujii wanted to take the family to Japan, to live in Japan, but he sat. Uncle Richard set his foot down and said, "No, I don't know anybody there. My country, I'm a U.S. citizen, and I'm gonna stay here." So the parents succumb to that, resign to the fact that okay, well, we're not going to Japan.
Mm.
So it wasn't working out. He had a meager job as a bartender in Hilo, and then paying rent for his to live, and then Auntie May, the elder daughter in that family, Fujii, got married, and then got married to pineapple uh, laborer uh, in Lanai, the Kinoshita, and then actually he went from the bartending job to Lanai picking pineapples when the war broke out. So he's on record, and the draft was in place. So uh, basically at that time, so um, he was training, and so he was in the Hawaii Army National Guard, and the designator for the outer islands was 299 infantry, and the one in Honolulu was referred to as 298. So there was an incident where when after training they were coming back to the Big Island. Basically, it was torpedo. But this was before the war started, and there was about 22 casualties before the war. But anyway, when war broke out on December 7, 1941, because he was already in the military, even if he was National Guard, uh, he earned the Pacific Asiatic War, and and then it never, I did docent when there was this big roadshow of the all pictures of the 442 Regimental Combat Team came to Hilo, and then they allowed me to put up Uncle Rich's bio, and where he was born, where he worked, and where he was recruited from, and all that, and then listed down all the medals that he got. Of course, the family knew that he got the Bronze Star, and he got the Purple Heart, but I never questioned the other common medals, and one of them was Asia Pacific. Then until it took me all these years to last year when I was a docent for that uh, display here in Hilo, someone asked me, "Oh, he served as an MIS because that's their thinking that that's how he got the Asia Pacific." But doing my research, uh, find out that because he was already in the Hawaii Army National Guard when the war broke out, uh, Pearl Harbor, of course, in the Pacific, so he earned that. medal, but I didn't question why he got that. So all any soldier who was serving in the guard or whatever, when war broke out, got that medal. Of course, he never served in the Pacific. The 100 Battalion served in Europe. So I keep learning more specifically, but I took somebody off the street to query that, how he got that. Yeah, so interesting. But for Uncle Richard, the 298 and 299 became the core of the 100 Battalion. See, they were shipped off to the mainland, and upon reaching San Francisco, they got renamed instead of being part of the 298 and 299 regimental, Hawaii Army National Guard, that they got their designator as 100 Battalion right there when they entered San Francisco Bay. And then they quickly renamed it the 1 Puka Puka. And then he got training first in Camp Savage, Minnesota, and then further training down at Camp Shelby, Mississippi. This they were kind of like they didn't know what to do with this Japanese outfit, So their training was, and they finally reached Africa. They landed in Africa in 1943. So from the call being deployed to being shipped to the United States from that time after the war, 42 all the way for 43. That's a long basic training, because when I went basic training, you're only talking about 8 weeks, but this guy's a year long, training, because they didn't know what to do with this outfit, whether to send them off to fight, or are they trustworthy enough to fight? So in landing in Africa, Oran, Oran, what was that? I think Oran is what, Libya or Morocco or so. And then they were simply they moved forward all the supplies, like barrels of oil and all that, and the 100 Battalion basically was pulling security duty. They didn't had the orders to go and invade yet the European, in Europe, yeah. But finally, they got orders to go fight as an infantry, and then landed in Salerno, and then so he wasn't part of the first team, because he was Company F. When you go invade, you only go four companies wide, A, B, C, and D, and then the other companies is like replacement companies. So because of casualties upon the landing in Salerno and moving up to one very critical battle was the Monte Cassino. That's where along the way Company B had so many casualties that Uncle Richard in Company F was told to go and replace, to fill that casualty. So, and then he himself fought for one whole month just before hitting Cassino, and then that was it for him. Yeah, one of the heavy heavy casualty battle for the 100 Battalion was taking the hills before reaching Monte Cassino. And you see, the Germans had already occupied Italy. So we were pushing them out of Italy. They were pushing them out of Italy. So, and again, this is the early part of the 100 Battalion into the actual war. So basically, the plans, the procedures was to try not to damage any historical landmarks. And so even in Vietnam, it was common practice. if the Viet Cong was trying to run away from the United States military, they would go hide in cemeteries. So all those kind of places, landmarks, cemeteries, historical monuments, and then in this case, Monte Cassino from the 15th century was an abbey, and then so they wanted to preserve such an old 15th century building, but to the Germans it didn't matter. They just brought in their weaponry and all that, and then started to setting them up to to hold down that Monte Cassino. So for the 100, uh, it was a hard battle because they had to shoot up and then to climb the cliffs and all that to get to the abbey. So they were taking so much casualty that finally they changed their plan of attack and then allowed the Army Air Force back then to go and bomb it to flatten it out. And then from there it was smooth sailing all the way into France, and then finally just on the borders of France they had another big battle, and that was the getting the Lost Battalion. This was a Texas National Guard, Army National Guard unit, and then they were they themselves, the Texas uh, military army unit was one regiment, and a regiment is a fairly big size. Regiment consists of brigades, and like you would say 442nd was actually only one brigade tall, but brigade, brigade is several regimental combat teams like that, So, but they tried to retrieve their own people, but they couldn't. So the word got out that hey, there's this track Japanese unit, and then they up to their record was flawless. They was really, brave soldiers, and so they got called in, and then but they took a bad licking too over there. Lost a lot of lives there. Uncle Richard, uh, all his youth, of course, uh, worked on the farm. You carry, 100-pound sacks of coffee bag, long distance, and so forth. That's typical daily farm routine. So you get broad shoulders, just like weightlifting. Prepare your body, build up your body that way. But this, like Uncle Richard folks working on a coffee farm, that's how they got big. And of course he was tall. His father was tall. My grandfather was tall. But uh, in the war, the common weaponry, assigned weapon is the M1. M1, and it's not a very powerful weapon, Yeah, but the bigger Japanese uh, were assigned the BR, the Browning automatic rifle. So in comparison to the sound, the M1, you go like that, But so the Germans weren't too afraid of that, But the BR, it sounds like, so it spits out a lot of bullets in a couple of seconds. So they go for those kind of targets for. They were looking, they would shoot down to the target, those kind of big targets, and then that caused his demise because basically he was a big Japanese, because the M1 was even big for a typical Japanese. If you put on the bayonet on top, it's taller than like more than 50 or 60% of the typical Nisei soldier. So BR more heavy. You need a husky guy that can, be carrying around that, too. So that was his demise. So, he died in 1943, November 22, 1943, and then I don't know what, I haven't investigated, but his body was brought back to Punch Bowl. You see, after the war, that's when they started clearing that crater, Punch Bowl crater, to make it as a cemetery. So, and then his body in a casket first came to Kona, and then they had funeral service there, and then finally was interred at the National Cemetery at Punchbowl in 1953. No, 40. I'm sorry, 48. So all this year, 5 years, I don't know where that body was, whether it was exhumed from another cemetery in Europe, but they brought back that casket. Of course, nobody viewed it. It was a metal casket in Kona, and then I don't think it was no, it's not a empty casket, you know, because why would you bury one empty casket, right, in the punch bowl? So body must have been exhumed from the day he died in 1943 all the way up to 48. In the picture, I know it was 1948 because Gary Yamamoto was, born in 1948, and he was with Auntie Jane, cuddling them, because Auntie Jane and Uncle Tommy lived in Honolulu at the time. So, and then our family, we didn't get to pay homage to Uncle Richie until 1953. Yeah. So 51 or 53, maybe 51. Yeah, 1951, I'm sorry, yeah.
Can you talk about again briefly how the dad wanted to go back to Japan at some point before the war, and what, right?
Yeah.
And was it because of the coming war, or
No. He just wanted to pull stakes and go back to Japan, taking his whole family. But they had respect for the eldest son, and well, he made his family. He's going to stay with.
And what, he would have been a teenager around that time?
No, others, yeah, either right at the time he graduated or before that, for high school. Yeah.
His death had a big impact on the family.
Yeah, he's of course being the eldest son. When he got news that Uncle Richard was killed in action, and that really mentally destroyed him, basically. Yeah, but when you look at that's a sacrifice many Issei parents had to do. And I think their fortitude throughout the war as a unit was outstanding, and then for the next generation, they never only think about themselves. They laid the foundation for equal rights and all that for the Japanese, basically, and not only for the Japanese but the Chinese and other ethnic Asia country people. Yeah, we were discriminated all the time because throughout their lives, all the other Nisei soldiers, they grew up on plantations, and they couldn't ascend themselves in higher position. They were basically, no matter how many years you work in a plantation, you just work as in that same position as the lowest rung of labor. So yeah, so they paved the way, and then coming out of that is that Japanese term, and this is true in any ethnic, but ethnicity, but in Japanese they call it the okage-sama, that I am what I am because of you.